Untamed here. Obviously, the price of new vehicles today have gotten completely out of touch with reality. Most Americans cannot justify going out and spending $50,000 plus on a new vehicle. Heaven forbid you need a truck or a full-size SUV, get ready to fork over anywhere from $65,000 to $90,000 for it. People are saying no thank you, and they're clearly voting with their pocketbooks. If you go to any dealership today, what are you going to find? You're going to see lines upon lines of unsold inventory sitting there collecting dust, many times unsold carryover units from the previous year. Obviously, the cost of vehicles came at the hand of hyperinflation. Throughout the pandemic, we have seen a 42% increase in MSRPs across the board, across all vehicle manufacturers. That is at the hand of hyperinflation that we saw since 2019, really. And when you add on the fact that the cost of labor continues to skyrocket, again, kind of as a byproduct of hyperinflation, we're just consistently seeing the growth rate of these price tags. They have priced out the middle class. In today's video, though, I'm going to talk about a factor in which I believe really is a huge part of the problem, and it continues to be a part of the problem as we lean forward. Stick with me as we talk through it. Electric vehicles are a huge part of the reason why all vehicles now cost an arm and a leg, and let me explain. During the pandemic, EVs became wildly popular. They became increasingly popular really by the day, seemingly, and all vehicle manufacturers started leaning into it. They put a ton of money, billions and billions of dollars into research and development, only for them to fall on their face. Every vehicle manufacturer, with the exception of Tesla, has lost money on their electric vehicle segments. Ford, in particular, lost $4.5 billion over the last 2 years on their EVs, like the Ford F-150 Lightning, the Ford Mustang Mach-E, you name it. They're losing a tremendous amount of money. And it's not just Ford. Every vehicle manufacturer is losing a lot of money on those EVs. They went all in on the research and development, and they poured so much money into it because they thought they were going to be a little bit more popular. They were very optimistic about EVs within the United States. But as we see right now, sales continue to plummet, and rightfully so. A lot of vehicle manufacturers went all in on EVs because they did surge in popularity during the pandemic. Money was cheap back then, quote unquote, meaning you can go get an auto loan with a 1% to 2% interest rate pretty easily. They're handing out auto loans like candy, just as they were with mortgages, home loans too, right? But nowadays, it is a very different story. EV sales were soaring when people could buy them as a secondary or third vehicle within their household. But right now, things are more tight. Americans are living paycheck to paycheck right now. They can't justify going out to buy a secondary or third vehicle for their households. For context's sake, Tesla, of course, is leading the pack with EV sales within the United States. Just in 2024, they produced just over 1.8 million EVs for the market. They're second worldwide to a company called BYD, which is a Chinese conglomerate. They produced 4 million EVs just in 2024. Far behind Tesla within the United States is Chevy and Ford. Both Chevy and Ford are neck and neck with their EV sales. Now, you have to admit, it is quite telling that EV sales continue to plummet even as they had pretty substantial government subsidies and tax credits being applied to them. We had that $7,500 tax credit that was offered on all eligible EV sales, and assuming you were eligible for it based on your income, you got that $7,500 tax credit right off the top of the sale price of your EV. That is going away at the end of September here in 2025. Keep that in mind. So I can't imagine EV sales making any bit of an upturn, especially during the current administration here. You know, there's no additional money being cut off these price tags. And personally, I prefer it that way. I don't like seeing the American taxpayer foot the bill for these government subsidies. You know, they're cramming EVs down our throats, and that to me was the bothersome part of it. Average EV price tag within the United States right now, here in 2025, is just over $56,000. That is actually $7,000 more than the average new vehicle price, combustion engine new vehicle price. So you're not really saving money going out to buy an EV. It would be different if you can go buy one and save tremendously over a combustion engine counterpart, right? But that's not the case. Vehicle manufacturers got way too optimistic about EV sales within the United States. To paint a picture for you, at the beginning of 2024, there were 2.6 million new EVs sitting on dealership lots across the country. 2.6 million. That was a 57% increase over the start of 2023. So again, they were going all in. They're putting all chips on the table to go all in on EVs. And well, that proved to their detriment because they saw that growth rate of how many units were just sitting collecting dust on dealership lots, and combining the fact that so many dealerships were actually turning away their EV allocations. They were turning away their deliveries. You know, Ford dealerships were saying no thank you to their Mustang Mach-E's. They're saying no thank you to those F-150 Lightnings. They didn't want them because they were a huge burden. They were tremendously difficult to sell. And any Ford dealership general manager will be quick to tell you that. It doesn't matter where you live. You can be in a very liberal state, in a very liberal city, and even then, electric vehicles weren't selling. So that actually forced a lot of vehicle manufacturers, not just Ford, to halt or slow production of most of their EVs. They slowed them throughout 2024 to try to catch up and sell their unsold units from the previous year. Some of you may be thinking, well, how do EVs impact the price of other vehicles, like the combustion engine vehicles? Well, like I alluded to earlier, every vehicle manufacturer is losing a tremendous amount of money on their EV segments. They're not just losing that money, letting it go up in smoke. They're going to try to help make up for those losses elsewhere. They're trying to counter it elsewhere. And what that means generally is hiking up the price points of all their other vehicles within their lineup just a little bit to try to make up for the losses. And we see that from every single vehicle manufacturer. Like Ford will not just take that $4.5 billion loss to the stomach. They're not going to do that. Instead, they're going to hike up the price tag of their Bronco lineup a little bit, their other F-150 combustion engine lineup, their Super Duty lineup. They're just going to bump them up, maybe $1,000, $2,000 here and there, enough to help justify the losses that they endured on their EVs. Quick plug here for the folks who may not be tracking. I do have another channel called Untamed Reviews. Untamed Reviews has more formalized vehicle reviews, of course, as the name would entail, but it also includes a lot of my personal vehicle ownership experience, modifications, stuff like that, kind of my more old school content that I used to provide here at Untamed Motors. If you'd like to check that channel out, I encourage you to do so. I'll throw a link in the video description below if you're interested in checking that type of content out too. Of course, Untamed Motors here is a little bit more car market analysis focused these days, and I hope a lot of you still appreciate that. Actually, most analysts believe that we're going to see the same thing happen with tariffs. Obviously, not all vehicles within vehicle manufacturers are produced out of cheaper labor countries. For instance, we have some Toyota vehicles produced out of Mexico. We have some Ford vehicles produced out of Mexico, some components built out of Mexico. It doesn't impact all of their lineup, all of their vehicles. So instead of hiking up the price tags of their vehicles that are produced in Mexico, let's say 20%, 25%, instead of doing that, they'll hike up their entire lineup just a little bit, maybe 5, maybe 7% is what most analysts believe across the entire lineups to help justify the tariffs that they're getting hit with. So again, you're not just going to take it all within one vehicle. Like the Toyota Tacoma isn't going to bump up in price 25%, but instead, the Tundra, the Toyota Crown, the 4Runner, all the other vehicles within their lineup, price tags are going to go up just enough to justify those tariffs. We saw Ford halt their production of the F-150 lineup throughout 2024 because there were so many unsold 2022s and 2023s sitting on dealership lots. We also saw GM, General Motors, they produced 150,000 less EVs than originally targeted for 2024. So again, they slowed production tremendously because they saw that the demand was just no longer there. And it wasn't just domestic vehicle manufacturers. We're talking all vehicle manufacturers are starting to dial back and slow and halt production of their EVs because they know it's just going to lead to a tremendous loss. Even Volkswagen. Volkswagen canceled their $2 billion production plant that they had planned to put together out in Germany. They canceled it entirely because, again, the writing was on the wall and they just didn't want to lose more money on it. So there's other reasons at play as to why EV popularity has plummeted over the last few years here. Resale value on EVs is not as promising. So when people buy an electric vehicle, they're kind of rolling the dice a little bit when it comes time to trade it in or sell that vehicle private party. The resale values just are not there currently. On top of that, charging networks, the supporting infrastructure within the United States anyway, isn't exactly where we want it to be. Obviously it's good and it's growing by the day still, but that there doesn't allow sufficient peace of mind for most Americans. They want to be able to take a cross-country road trip without worrying too much. And in many parts of the country, you need to be very strategic with where you charge up. And the final point I'll throw out here too is the cost of electricity. When you charge your vehicle, it is starting to become increasingly expensive for the electricity to power and charge up your vehicle. So the savings that you are technically getting by having an EV over a fossil fuel or gas combustion engine is starting to minimize that gap a little bit between how much you're spending on electricity versus gas. There are vehicle manufacturers who are remaining adamant about keeping things at least somewhat simplistic and still offering naturally aspirated platforms like Honda in particular. They have the Honda Ridgeline, the Honda Passport, the all-new Honda Passport, where they're still offering a naturally aspirated V6 option. They know that people love simplicity, affordability, and reliability, and they still want to try to offer that to people, okay? But we are seeing a lot of vehicle manufacturers like Toyota who are leaning almost too much into the hybridization of everything, where they're strapping hybridized battery packs to combustion engines, right? The hybridized options. We see it with the Toyota Tacoma now, the Tundra, the 4Runner, the Sequoia, the Land Cruiser, you name it. Everything is just becoming hybridized today, almost to a fault, right? They've gotten rid of their naturally aspirated options. And that there is a large reason why a lot of people actually gravitated to brands like Toyota, because they were very simplistic, affordable, and reliable. So having a naturally aspirated platform does offer that peace of mind that most Americans at least appreciated from brands like Toyota, and historically speaking. Look at the price tags of any hybridized option. Sure, you get the added fuel economy, but you're paying for it. Go look at the new Tundra next to a hybridized Tundra with the iForce Max. You can get a twin turbo V6 or a twin turbo V6 hybrid. And well, the hybrid option always costs substantially more. Look at the Tacoma, same exact thing. The 4Runner, they just cost so much more. And that just almost defeats the purpose for so many Americans. They don't want to spend an arm and a leg to get into a vehicle. They truly are realizing that less is more. You know, whenever they overdo a vehicle and they overdo the engine, it just becomes burdensome. Most Americans want the ability, even though they likely won't, but they want to know, at least in the back of their mind, that they can pop the hood on their vehicle and potentially work on it, learn how to work on their vehicle. And you could do that, generally speaking, with a naturally aspirated V6 or a simplified 4-cylinder underneath the hood, or of course a V8. You can actually work on them with a level of peace of mind. But when they start strapping all this technology to them and overdo it, they make it overly complex. And that is just a huge turnoff for most Americans. Gotten to the point where people would rather spend a little bit more at the pump if it means having an added level of peace of mind. You know, if they know that they can drive that vehicle, it's going to work, it's always going to start for them, and they don't have to take it into the shop every 4, 5, 6 months for some sort of tech maintenance. Whether it's on their hybridized option that they bought or the technology in the interior of the vehicle, it's just become overdone. People want simplicity. That's it. Heaven forbid you drive that hybridized vehicle beyond the warranty, man, you're going to be really rolling the dice. If something goes wrong with it, it can be catastrophically expensive to repair. And well, part of me wonders if that is all by design. Vehicle manufacturers want you to take it into the dealership and have them perform the work on it, perform the maintenance on it, so you don't pop the hood. They don't want you to work on your own vehicle anymore, it seems. And that's not even considering the cost of your insurance. Insurance has over doubled within the United States just in the last 2.5 years. And in some states, it has tripled over the last 2.5 years, if you can believe that. EVs would be good. They would be a good option if you can keep them affordable. Keep them affordable and still offer a level of peace of mind with it. If you're having to spend $56,000 plus on it, and that's not even for a good example. The really nice examples are going to cost you $80,000 plus, and in some cases, well over 6 figures. If they kept them simple and they kept them affordable, I think the popularity of EVs within the United States would start to skyrocket. But as of right now, we're far off. Up the video there, guys. Let me know what you think. Do you agree? Do you think the advent and the leaning forward with electric vehicles has led to the uptick of price tags of all new vehicles available within the United States today? Seriously, I'd be curious to know what your thoughts are on this topic. As always, I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to tune into my videos. If you appreciate this type of content whatsoever, I do respectfully request that you please consider liking and subscribing. Your support means a ton, and I promise it doesn't go unnoticed. Till next time.